people say that, the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. I disagree. I believe fear is the root of all evil. Everything that we've ever done, whether we're, terrible to somebody because we feel insecure, or we, start a war because we're running out of resources and this country has them. It's all fear-based. Everything is, so when you act out of fear and don't listen to your intuition, you make terrible decisions. And the truth is that when you listen to your intuition and you learn to distinguish it from fear, right? And you push through that fear, then you're going to get amazing results regardless.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of the L.O.V.E Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. You ever wondered how you could possibly build a wildly successful business while also making the world a better place? Well, today we're going to be exploring how to create a purpose-driven venture that not only generates abundance for you, but also creates positive change for humanity and our planet. And but first, of course, I want to welcome you to Live, Love, Engage, especially if this is your first time tuning in. I am Gloria Grace, founder of Align to Shine Academy, and I empower women over 50 to love themselves and the life they're living. And our guest today is Melissa LaPlante, and she's a global keynote speaker, author, and business coach. And by merging science and spirituality, two of my favorite topics, she helps individuals unlock their personal abundance, achieve financial success within the current paradigm, and build impactful ventures that give back to humanity and the world. Hopefully I'll be able to speak today. But anyway, without further ado, I am going to bring Melissa up to the stage and welcome you officially to Live, Love, Engage.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm just going to give you a super fair warning. I'm in my home office, and my dogs are in a conversation, apparently. So apologies if you hear that in the background. But yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad the dogs are here too. You know what? They'll probably add to the atmosphere. It's always good. And I'm a dog lover and a cat lover, but I did close my door.
I have both. Yeah, I love me some animals.
Absolutely. So I thought we'd start off because I do want to dive into this topic because I think it's so important. But what exactly does a purpose-driven business mean to you? And how did you kind of discover your own alignment between, making money, which is great, but also having an impact?
Purpose-driven to me, and I could love that you started with that question because I think it's a misunderstood term in some degrees. I think that, when you think of purpose-driven, you think of, oh, my company has to be doing something for consumers that have a need. It has to be, servicing a need. And that's not necessarily the case. Purpose-driven is more about being intention-led, knowing that, you are showing up sustainably, socially conscious, that you have, and sustainability is not just environmental sustainability. Are the hours you're working your employees sustainable? Is the wage you're giving them sustainable? Is the way they're being treated sustainable? And so, purpose-driven really means just understanding your effect in the world and on your consumers, and showing up in a positive and giving way versus what can we take, right? I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 13, walking dogs, ironically. Um, and so, it's just always been important to me to flourish in business, but as a person, my moral compass also leads me to be intention led and purpose driven. And I just became really good at that paradigm.
Well, I love that, and I'm glad that you also clarified, the difference between, yes, maybe a purpose of being to earn a profit or to serve your customers, but really to have a much more deeper uh, impact, and not only, as you say, not only on the environment, but also your employees too. What I've got like lots of questions, but one of the first things that popped into my head actually while we were talking about that is, what are some of the benefits actually of having your business be that way?
Oh
Having
my
it really
gosh.
have that specific
I love that you asked that
purpose.
question. You asked the best questions, Gloria. I love it. So there are so many benefits aside from, all of the positives of the things I just listed. Harvard Business just did a study that businesses that are showing up sustainably are 400% more profitable than their unsustainable counterparts. And I don't know any CEO out there, myself included, who wouldn't love a 400% raise. So, and so there's, also when, I'm known as the box list business coach and consultant because so many years, I've been coaching for almost 15 years in leadership and development in one way or another. And people always tell me, oh my God, you think so far out of the box. And I'm like, I don't have a box. There's no box. And so, that's why I developed Boxless Business, because it shows up, looking at the different aspects of the business in a way that is cohesive, right? And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get into more of that. But,
Yeah.
I think the benefits are having dedicated subject matter experts that care, that want to show up because they're being valued properly, right? You have increased profitability. I teach one-to-one problem solving. So, I'm an autistic and ADHD individual. I, in a corporation, do not expect a corporation to educate every employee in the whole building on autism and make everything as autism friendly as possible. I would prefer that they just came to me and said, Melissa, what is your actual struggle in this environment? And what can we do to meet that need? Period. They don't need to be dumping millions of dollars into one size fits all initiatives to directly meet the needs of their actual employees. So, there's a lot of benefit to showing up this way.
I love that. And yeah, and that was one thing I was going to possibly touch on, because I know that you mentioned that you do, I guess, work with as part of your business. Is you do like working with people who are, similar to you. And I think we all like to do that. I think, especially as coaches, we like to find that audience that we can relate to in particular.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
like I said, I've been coaching for almost 15 years, but I went into business for myself a year ago, little over a year ago. And at the time, yes, I was working with neurodivergent entrepreneurs, because nobody knows a neurodivergent entrepreneur like a neurodivergent entrepreneur, right?
Right,
But
exactly.
I realized that what I was doing was trying to help people who don't fit in the box, which, by the way, no one fits in, but people who don't fit in the box navigate fulfilling their dreams. Then I realized I'm kind of mowing the yard one blade of grass at a time. So what I've decided to do, because I have so much experience in corporate leadership, half my career I was in IT leadership and development for a global outsourcing company. So I definitely know what I'm doing in that wheelhouse. And I realized that I need to be, instead of helping people fit in the box, I need to jump into these corporations and get rid of the box.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Because it definitely is so limiting and constricting when you feel like you've got to operate in a certain way, and yet create, processes, I think, that are going to fit everybody, but we are all unique individuals. And
Exactly.
so what's going to work for somebody is not going to work for somebody else. And, I mentioned early when I was talking about your bio, that you also like to combine science with spirituality. So can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that? Because again, like I said, I geek out on quantum physics, but
Me too.
But I also have, my sort of more spiritual woo-woo side, as some would say, as well.
Me
So
too.
yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that and how you kind of weave that into business.
Yeah, that's the secret sauce to my teaching, right? So I have a 3-part method in boxless business. And the first part is the physics of success. I have been obsessed with quantum physics for probably 20 years. I did a deep dive and never came up for air. And one day I was sitting down and I was like, how do I always achieve? Because every goal I've ever set for myself, ever, no matter how grandiose or large, I've achieved. And accept my current goals, right? Which I will achieve. I'm just still in the process. But I decided to sit down and like really analyze my process, my personal process of goal achievement. And then one day I got a hair to compare it to the laws of physics and see if I could make a one-to-one comparison. And I could on every level, right? And so I developed, so just something to give you kind of a teaser of what this talks about. Take, for instance, you being someone who is in the woo-woo spiritual world as well. I'm sure you've heard of the law of attraction. Well, it's not really a scientific law, but it's a real thing. So what is the scientific law? It's electromagnetism. Why? Because our brains produce electricity and our bodies conduct it. And our emotions create an actual magnetic field around us that can be measured with tools. MIT discovered that. Pretty cool stuff. And so when your thoughts are in line with your emotions and your actions or lack thereof, that is your electromagnet. That is the frequency that you are vibrating at that is attracting other things of that frequency. And that is neither good nor bad, because if your thoughts say, I suck, and your emotions say, I can't do it, and you take no action, that's your reality. Nothing happens, right?
Yeah.
So, and you can't argue with the laws of physics. I know I tripped and fell the other day. Gravity's totally still working. And so, so the physics of it is basically teaching leaders how to take actions with physics behind them to know that those actions are going to be successful, right? The spirituality part of it is what I call, is a system that I designed called abundance banking. So abundance banking, every single one of us is an abundance bank account with an abundance of our knowledge, experience, talents, curiosities, the way our brain thinks, everything, right? And then every person that you know who's also a bank account is in your abundance portfolio, right? And so in a leadership position, when you really look at your portfolio and see the assets, not just the titles, because the slogan for boxless business is no boxes, no labels, no limits, right? So let's say you have Ted in accounting, and he's great at accounting and you love him for that, but he also had a few years in college where he was interested in marketing and he didn't love the whole picture of it, but he has a super awesome knack for coming up with like ads, right? So in a boxless business, you can actually pull Ted in on that marketing meeting, regardless of his, experience, degrees, etc., because his brain does that thing, right? And you can say, hey, can you add to this? And it creates a collaborative versus competitive environment, right? People aren't boxed in by their position. Also, validating self-taught people, because my father and I both are self-taught experts. My father passed away, but he taught himself computer programming and went on to be a senior systems architect for an aeronautic space company by the time he died.
Wow.
And that was within a 10 or 15 year span, right? I taught myself physics, and I have sat across the table from traditionally physics trained people who get what I'm saying, agree with what I'm saying, and agree that I know what I'm talking about, but I didn't go to school for it. So we need to be hiring outside the box. We need, do you know how many people don't apply for a job because they see they need this degree and that degree and this amount of experience, but they're actually subject matter experts who could really do the job and love it, right? So, it's really understanding the assets of your abundance portfolio as a company to really maximize what you can do with your team, right? So,
Right.
and then the final piece of it is what my company's named after, the self-awareness method, CELLF. And
Hmm.
that's because we're each a cell in the greater organism, and we each have that deposit of abundance that we were born with, something we are
Mm.
just so passionate at and good at. I can never talk enough about what I do because it's my abundance, right?
Right.
And so when you hire people who are, based off their assets as an abundance bank account versus their certifications, their degrees, who they knew, whatever, right? Then you hire people who are so passionately excited for the opportunity. You hire people who are grateful. You hire people who are dedicated, and, you can coach them in the gaps that they didn't get from school. You know what I mean? That's a leader's job, is to
Right.
cultivate and develop their team, right? So this is what I do. I teach leaders how to be leaders. It's funny.
Mm.
I love the term that I came up with. You've heard the term a man's man. Well, I consider myself a leader's leader.
Mm. I like that. Very good. Very good. Yes. So, so how would someone, so let's say, 'cause a lot of my audience are women entrepreneurs, and let's say maybe right now maybe they have a small team, or maybe not, but maybe they're looking to start, adding team members.
Right.
So what do you advise them to do to how to be able to find people that, because normally, you set up, as you said before, you'll say, oh, yeah, I want someone to be able to fill this position. You have these requirements, but to have it more abundance minded, I love that, and putting that into it. So, how would you go about, putting out a call for, I want to hire somebody, and this is, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So I think you just got to have the right facilitators. So what I mean by that is put out the description the same way you would, right?
Mhm.
And add if you prefer a degree, that's okay. You're allowed to prefer a degree, but also have a section where they can actually fill out a questionnaire that is related directly to the job duties, qualifying questions that they can show up and say, they can kind of prove, hey, I actually know what I'm talking about despite this degree. And then, I remember years and years ago when I was in college, I was a engineering headhunter, and I understand the pain of interviewing. Well, not to mention I've been in a leadership position in almost every company I've been in. So I understand the pain of interviewing and how tedious it can be. And I think the best way to weed out your best candidates is really give, a format that they can answer specific questions that gives you the confidence they can do the job. Right. And many administrative positions do this typing test or, a quiz on different software things, et cetera. Right. So I think that the best way to not waste your time interviewing a bunch of people who just really wish that they could do the job, but aren't actually subject matter experts, is to have, something that is quantitative that they can actually go through and answer and fill out and whatever. And then you can take that and say, okay, wow, this person, they didn't go to college. They don't have any experience in this field, but these answers are it. This is what I'm looking for. Right. So I think that would be the best approach to take.
Very cool. All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody else out there as well. And it makes a lot of sense too. So I want to get back to when we were talking about this, purpose driven business. So, what strategies have you found most effective for measuring, let's say, both financial success but also positive impact on humanity?
That's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because I'm running a case study right now for exactly those things. I'm
Mm.
actually looking for 10 leaders, which by the time this airs, I'm sure I'll have found them. Uh, but I am looking for 10 leaders to participate in a case study where they implement the box list method into a corporate environment. And then we can measure how they've grown. But I feel like, it's been very successful in my one-to-one, when I was working with entrepreneurs, when I worked with them, especially in the self-awareness section of it, really helping them learn who they are, how they relate to their career, what they want to achieve and things like that. And really zeroing in their focus really helped them make decisions with intention that led to positive results, right? So as far as the data goes, I am excited as heck about doing this study because hello, I am a scientist. And so, and I love data mining. I know that's insane, but I do. And so what I will do is once I get some numbers, I would love to send them to you so that you can kind of, add them under the blurb of the conversation we're having.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. I would greatly appreciate that for you to.
Yeah, me too. So hopefully I find those 10 leaders soon.
Right. I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will.
I know. I'm not worried.
Something else I want to ask you about too, and this kind of goes along with what we were talking about. And, when you were talking about spirituality, and I know part of that is also like paying attention to your intuition.
Oh, yeah.
So how does that play into, making strategic business decisions, but, how also, because I think I've even written an article about this in the past as well, is balancing it though with, being focused on your numbers but, so being able to, how do you
balance
have
the
you been
two.
able to kind of combine that?
Absolutely. So I have always followed my intuition from the time when I was 17, I moved from Kansas City to Los Angeles by myself. I knew one person, I had no money, no plan, but my intuition said, this is home and this is where you belong. And 25 years later, it was not wrong. Okay. So, I'm not religious, but I am extremely spiritual. And I feel like, intuition is sort of the universe's voicemail or God's voicemail or whatever you want to call it in your faith, right? But it's that place that the higher self and the higher universe is telling you this is legit. And what people tend to come across when they listen to their intuition is fear, right? And fear, people say that, the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. I disagree. I believe fear is the root of all evil. Everything that we've ever done, whether we're, terrible to somebody because we feel insecure, or we, start a war because we're running out of resources and this country has them. It's all fear-based. Everything is, so when you act out of fear and don't listen to your intuition, you make terrible decisions. And a lot of times money can be the root of that fear. Like, oh, if I do this change that I really want to do, then it's really going to hit my numbers. Right. And the truth is that when you listen to your intuition and you learn to distinguish it from fear, right. And you push through that fear, then you're going to get amazing results regardless. And having a goal and taking actionable steps towards that goal, it's using those physics of success. If you follow those physics of success and you listen to your intuition and you practice that self-awareness and that abundance mindset, you cannot fail. Einstein actually said a quote, match the frequency of the reality you wish to achieve, and you cannot help but achieve that reality. It is not philosophy, it is physics.
Yeah, and I know this is so true because it is. It really makes so much sense because when you are focused on being in that high vibration state, then number one, I find that things are a lot easier to deal with anyway, and you find that you're more in the flow. But when you're miserable, then sometimes it's harder to even get stuff done. I found.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and it goes back to that electromagnet, right? What frequency are you vibrating at? Something that I love to tell my clients is to picture a bowl of room temperature water and a glass of room temperature water. And then you pour the room temperature water in the room temperature water. Does the temperature of the water change? Of course not. So if you are vibrating in this negative frequency, if you are, your electromagnet is aligned in a way that's not conducive to what you're wanting, and the actions that you're taking are not direct with your intention, then that's going to be your reality. But if you, flip the script and, you understand these ways to take actions and listen to your intuition and do these things, then it's impossible to fail. You're going to hit bumps along the way, right? There's the law of inertia. An object in motion stays in motion until an outside force stops it. But then that's when you go back to your drawing board and say, okay, what worked? What didn't work? And this is gravity. Gravity is we all know that what goes up must come down. But we also don't realize that breathing in and out is part of gravity. Waves coming in and out is gravity. Your heart beating is gravity. It's all gravity. And something that is important to understand about gravity in business is that when you have a big win, there will be a fall, and that's okay. It's normal, right? But it is understanding to surrender to that process and to take that time to step back, reassess, reevaluate what's working, what's not working, what options do I have to make changes, right? This is where you kind of surrender to the gravity and to faith. And faith is huge, because if you don't have faith in what you're doing, faith in yourself, faith in your team, faith in your company and what they're doing, that plays a big part in the vibration of your electromagnet.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to, again, because I love this whole idea of being really purposeful with our business and being able to create a bigger impact in the world. And that's something that I want to do as well. What advice would you give for someone who really does feel called to make this bigger impact, but maybe they're afraid they might have to compromise somehow? They might have to compromise their values in order to be able to succeed. Because again, we live in this kind of culture that is so focused on, profit and succeeding, and also a lot of just go type of mentality, more of the masculine energy, frankly, as opposed to the feminine, which is where you can lean into your intuition. So what kind of advice would you have for someone who wants to do good, in the world, but maybe they're still a little, unsure about that?
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of people mistake that doing something good in the world means doing something big. And that's not true. Every single day, every choice that I make is with intention to be aligned with who I am as a person, which I know intimately because I developed the self-awareness process. And so a great example of this, I was driving down the road one day, several months back, and I saw a gentleman broken down on the side of the road. And my first thought was, well, I'm not going to pull over and help him. He seems like the type of guy that would know stuff about cars, and I know limited stuff about cars, but and I don't really have anything. I don't have money right now to help him get a tow truck or anything, and so I kept driving. And then I realized, my abundance philosophy is all about what can I give versus what can I get, and using what you do have in the moment to do that. And it doesn't have to be money, right? And so I felt really bad, and I actually pulled a U-turn and drove back. And I got out of the car and I said, I don't know anything about cars, and I don't have the money to help you get a tow truck or anything, but how can I show up for you? What can I do? Right? And then his wife got out of the car. I didn't realize he had anyone with him. And they were like, oh my God, thank you so much. If you could just give us a ride a mile down the road, our cousin lives there, he can help us. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. So I gave them a ride. But in the time that I gave the ride, I ended up finding out the wife had no idea that she was neurodivergent. We know our own. We can just tell you, and she had dreams of being a zoologist and all these things, but she had grown up poor and abused. Hey, ditto, And so I gave her just the inspiration I had to give by telling her, hey, this is where I came from, and this is where I am, and this is how I did it. And it wasn't the way that you think you have to do things, right? It's out of the box. It's boxless. And she was just in tears by the time she left my car. And I realized that was the abundance I was meant to give in that situation. It wasn't the ride. It wasn't the mechanical help. But if I had never stopped, if I had never asked how I can be of service, with what I did have available to me, I would have never had that experience. And that experience was a big part of, really solidifying abundance banking for me, really like saying, yeah, this is absolutely, because this is the way I've always been my whole life. But it's sometimes hard to quantify how one exists in words and steps and whatnot. So that's what I've spent the last 15 years doing, is developing these processes. And then I spent the last year or so going, okay, now they need words.
I love it. And you just reminded me of something that happened to me a couple of years ago as well, is that I had actually, someone had run into me, we were luckily it was very slow motion, and so there wasn't a whole lot of damage to my car. But then when I took the car to the dealer, and while they were doing some work on it, I wound up having a discussion with the receptionist, and she started telling me about all of the stuff that was going on in her life, and she was having struggling. And so I kind of did the same thing as you, as I wound up offering this woman advice, and I kind of came away from there, was like, well, if I hadn't gotten into that accident today, I wouldn't have gone over to see this person, and I wouldn't have been able to give her, the support that she needed in the moment, because she really, really needed it. So,
and that's your abundance. That is what you had to give.
Right.
And so so when people realize, take the steps to learn what their abundance is, right? Then they can, and to be conscious enough to say, I don't know how I can help you, because I don't necessarily have the resources I think you need,
right.
but with what I do have, how can I help? Right.
Yeah.
And that's, abundance banking. It's giving versus getting. So how do we translate this to business? Well, this is an excellent example I love giving people of a business that's already doing things boxlessly. There's a wine company in Northern California called 𝘺𝘺𝘺, and they had a terrible mole problem in their vineyards. Moles were eating up all their grapes and tearing up their vines. And instead of taking traditional measures like companies normally do, pesticides, traps, extermination, whatever, they decided to invest in building really attractive owl habitats, so that owls naturally wanted to live there. And then the owls all moved in and were like, look at all the takeout here. Yes. And so they solved the problem. They ate all the excess moles, and 1 or 2 moles is not going to hurt an entire vineyard, right? But they solved the problem. And so instead of taking from the environment by poisoning the earth, by, also, they saved a ton of money, because you have to redo those initiatives every few months to every year, depending on what it is that you're doing. So you're constantly paying for exterminators. Nobody's paying those owls to live in those awesome houses. That was a one-time investment, right? Yes. And so this is a way that a company can give to a problem versus take from a problem to meet its own needs, while increasing profitability, because 1, they saved their grapes, and 2, they saved the money that they would have spent repeatedly on extermination services, all while benefiting the environment. And this is abundance banking in action, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, so cool. I this has been amazing. And you've exceeded my expectations, frankly.
Aww,
so
thank you.
I love this discussion we've been having, and I know folks listening have been just getting so much value. But I love to throw a curveball at my.
Oh, I love to get one. Yeah, let's do it.
Because I love asking our guests, what are you curious about right now?
Teleportation. So like I said, I've been a huge physics nerd. And while I was, I tend to, even though I know my stuff, anytime I teach a master class or anytime I'm going to be in front of people, I tend to want to brush up a little, just to, make sure I'm on top of my game, make sure nothing changed. Science is obviously always changing. And so I was reading something about thermodynamics that sparked an idea, and I just went down this huge rabbit hole of the way that they should be doing teleportation versus the way they are. The really cool thing is I actually had a conversation yesterday with a guy who was a physics major in college, and threw all my ideas at him, and he was like, that's definitely plausible. That is a valid idea of what to do, right? And so that was really cool. Also, huge nerd you said you were geeking out about spirituality. I'm just a geek in general. I got so excited. I just posted a new newsletter called The Boxless Leadership Revolution on LinkedIn. And Dan Golden, the ninth chief of NASA, actually heart reacted to the first edition. And I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, no way. But yeah, I'm always curious about quantum physics, science. As an autistic person, that is my special interest. And so I'm constantly engaged in like new science and new theories. It's always driven me a little nuts that I will have this crazy theory that I think, oh, there's no way that's, plausible. And then 3 to 7 years later, NASA will come out, new breaking theory. And I'm like, oh, new for you, dude.
Well, that's it. And that's because, you know what? We're all connected. It's that energy.
It's a collective conscious. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, there was something else I was going to say about that, but I forgot now. Darn it. Well, that's okay.
It happens. I can relate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Cause I love that story. So it was just so good. So, yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. Cause, oh, well, it's okay. I know it was something related to when you were just talking about being curious about.
I do understand. I have ADHD. So I definitely understand. It's so funny. My friends giggle at me whenever I do that. Whenever I forget something, I'll say, oh, bye, little ADHD thought.
Yeah. I suspect I may be ADHD a little bit as well, but I've just never.
It's honestly a superpower in many ways. It is. It can definitely be challenge. But again, I teach people how to understand their challenges and their strengths enough to use their strengths to overcome their challenges, or when to ask for help from your abundance portfolio.
That's right. There you go. I love that. Okay. I'm trying to think. Oh, I know. Yeah. That's the question I want to ask you next is there anything else I should have asked you about that I didn't, or any other last point you want to leave with our listeners before we close today?
No, I think you asked excellent questions. And the only thing I would leave our listeners with is probably the key to every bit of my success has been 3 things. Number 1, lead with gratitude. Always be grateful for what you do have instead of what you don't have. And keep the mindset of, I posted something on my social media, a quote the other day that I came up with based on an interaction with someone, but it said, turn the end of I can't because into a to-do list that makes you the person that can because, right? So writing things down, being intentional, always, asking yourself, is this, does this action, does this choice, does this align with what I want to do, right? And then lastly, faith in the universe, faith that, physics can't fail you, that if you take the action, there will be a reaction, and if your electromagnet is tuned properly, it's going to be a good reaction, right? It's going to be the reaction you want. And so, just faith, gratitude, and dedication, those are the 3 ingredients that really keep you going, and self-compassion. I will add that as well, because it's okay to make mistakes. Einstein said, if you've never made a mistake, it's because you never tried anything. Right. And think about, I love to use the example of Thomas Edison. Right. And in 2 separate areas, I love to use this reference. And when people tell me, oh, I can't do this because I don't have a degree. I'm sorry, where did Thomas Edison get his electrical engineering degree? And also, when people get frustrated with, what they assume to be failure, the only failure is quitting or never starting. Making mistakes, having setbacks, those aren't failures. Those are learning points. Those are growth points. Those are ways to, now I know what not to do next time, right? And so, but Thomas Edison, 8,000 times. He failed 7,999 times before the 8,000th attempt worked. So imagine if he'd given up at time 20, 30, 50, 100. We'd be sitting in the dark right now. We wouldn't be on this phone. Nothing would be happening. I mean, Nicholas Tesla might have brought up the lead for sure, because he definitely coined a lot of the stuff that Edison did, but Edison did it, right? And so, it's definitely a powerful thing to give yourself compassion and to say, hey, you know, it's okay that I am where I am. But I'm just in constant competition with myself. I wake up every day trying to be better than not better than other people, better than I was the day before, right? My favorite quote in the world, and I've probably said this 7 million times, Maya Angelou said, do your best until you know better, then do better, right? And that's all there is to it.
Absolutely. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love you. We are like-minded people, but I am so glad that we connected. And I know
Me too.
Our audience is going to want to connect with you too. So where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
Right now it would be on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Okay. And I can message you the profile for LinkedIn. And then of course I have boxlessbusiness.com, which should be fully up and running by the time, you know, this comes to air. My former website, you know, focused on what I was doing, you know, before I decided to get behind the lawnmower. So,
well, I love the whole concept of the boxless business anyway. So I think you're on the right track for sure. And I did actually sign up for your newsletter, but I haven't read the article yet. So now I got to go check it out because
awesome.
Especially why the NASA guy was excited. So
cool. I know, no, that made my year. Like that was better than making money times a billion. Every time that, you know, I'm recognized for my work or people benefit from what I teach them, like that's my currency. And that's really what currency we need to be leading with, the abundance currency, right? That's why I call it abundance banking. So, you know, and I would, you know, if we had more time, I'd get into this whole story I have about it, but you know, we don't, and that is okay. But yes, you know, reach out to me on LinkedIn, on boxlessbusiness.com. You can also find me on Instagram at boxlessbusiness. So yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, I will be sure to have all of that information in the show notes for everyone. So not to worry. So thank you so much for being with us. And who knows, maybe we'll have to have you on again and dive more into the abundance thinking. So
I would absolutely enjoy that. I would enjoy that, Gloria. I have enjoyed our time together. Thank you for having me as a guest on your show. Thank you to your listeners for listening.
Absolutely. And I want to add that as well. So I do want to thank all of you for listening and for watching today. And I really hope you got as much value out of our conversation as I did for sure. And I encourage you to make sure that you're subscribed if you're not already. And and then I always like to end my show with this encouragement as well, is for you to go out today and every day and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.